In the unforgiving landscape of the American Southwest, where the desert wind carries both hope and despair, some stories challenge everything we think we know about love, dignity, and second chances. What happens when society turns its back on those who need compassion the most? And what kind of man sees beauty where others see only rejection? Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will make you question your own prejudices and remind you that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simplest act of human kindness. But before we dive into this incredible tale, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The year was 1882, and the small frontier town of Canyon Ridge, Arizona, sat like a weathered scar against the red mesa landscape. It was a place where survival meant following unspoken rules, and breaking those rules could mean exile or worse. On the eastern edge of town, where the Apache reservation met the dusty main street, lived two sisters who had become the town's most whispered-about residents. Aiyana and Itzel, twin daughters of a respected Apache medicine man who had died 3 winters prior, had fallen into a state that made even their own people keep their distance. The sisters, now 22 years old, lived in a ramshackle adobe hut that their father had built. But since his death, grief and despair had consumed them so completely that they had stopped caring for themselves entirely. Their long black hair had become matted and tangled. Their traditional dresses were stained and torn, and a pungent odor of unwashed bodies and neglect surrounded them like an invisible barrier. "Those Apache twins," the townspeople would whisper, covering their noses when the wind carried their scent down the main street. "Smell so bad that even the buzzards won't circle their place." The local Apache community, while sympathetic to their loss, had grown frustrated with the sisters' refusal to accept help. Traditional Apache culture valued cleanliness and dignity, and Aiyana and Itzel's condition brought shame to their people. Several tribal elders had tried to intervene, but the twins would retreat into their hut, emerging only to scavenge for food scraps behind the general store. Even the local missionary, Father Miguel, had attempted to reach out to them, but the smell was so overwhelming that he couldn't stay in their presence long enough to offer meaningful help. The sisters had become living ghosts, existing on the periphery of two worlds, but belonging to neither. Tom McKenzie, had been watching this tragic situation unfold for months. A 30-year-old cowboy who worked the cattle ranches surrounding Canyon Ridge. Tom was known for his quiet demeanor and his unusual habit of treating everyone, regardless of race or social standing, with the same respectful courtesy. He had sandy brown hair, weathered hands from years of ranch work, and eyes the color of sage that seemed to see things others missed. Unlike most of the cowboys who frequented the saloons and brothels of Canyon Ridge, Tom lived alone in a small cabin he'd built himself, about 2 miles from town. He was a man of few words but deep convictions, shaped by a childhood spent watching his own mother struggle with depression after his father's death in the Civil War. Every morning, as Tom rode into town for supplies, he would see the twins scavenging near the general store. While others would cross the street or hold handkerchiefs to their noses, Tom would simply tip his hat respectfully and continue on his way. He noticed things others didn't, the way Aiyana would protectively stand in front of her sister when strangers approached, or how Itzel's eyes still held flickers of intelligence despite their vacant stare. One particularly harsh morning in late October, Tom witnessed something that would change everything. He was loading supplies into his wagon when he saw a group of teenage boys throwing rocks at the twins, laughing as Aiyana and Itzel cowered behind a water barrel. "Get out of here, you stinking squaws!" One boy shouted. "You're making the whole town smell like a pig pen." Tom's jaw tightened. He had seen enough cruelty in his 30 years to recognize it in all its forms. Setting down his supplies, he walked over to the group with the measured pace of a man who had made up his mind. "That's enough," Tom said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from absolute certainty. The boys turned, recognizing Tom as one of the ranch hands who could break a wild horse or wrestle a steer to the ground. The leader of the group, a banker's son named Billy Hutchins, sneered but took a step back. "Come on, McKenzie. We're just having some fun. These two are nothing but trouble anyway." Tom's sage-colored eyes fixed on Billy with an intensity that made the boy's bravado crumble. "I said that's enough. Now move along before I decide to have some fun of my own." The boys scattered like tumbleweeds in a strong wind, leaving Tom alone with the two sisters who were still huddled behind the water barrel. For a long moment nobody moved. Then Tom did something that surprised even himself. He knelt down to their level, ignoring the overwhelming smell, and spoke directly to them. "My name is Tom McKenzie," he said gently. "I'm sorry those boys bothered you. Are you hurt?" Aiyana looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. She shook her head slowly, then helped her sister to her feet. Itzel remained silent, but Tom noticed that her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from what looked like malnutrition. "When's the last time you two had a proper meal?" Tom asked. The question seemed to catch Aiyana off guard. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Tom realized it might have been weeks since anyone had spoken to them with genuine concern rather than disgust or pity. Standing up slowly, Tom made a decision that would ripple through the lives of everyone involved. "I'm going to help you," he said simply, "if you'll let me." That evening Tom sat in his cabin, staring at the fire crackling in his stone hearth. The image of the twins' hollow eyes haunted him, reminding him of his own mother during her darkest days. He had been just a boy then, helpless to ease her suffering. But he wasn't helpless now. The next morning, Tom loaded his wagon with supplies that raised eyebrows at the general store. Soap, clean towels, a large metal tub, several dresses in simple cotton fabric, hairbrushes, and enough food to feed a family for a week. Store owner Harold Pembroke watched the unusual purchases with growing curiosity, planning to take in some boarders, Tom. Harold asked, trying to sound casual. "Something like that," Tom replied, paying for his goods without elaborating. When Tom's wagon pulled up outside the twins' adobe hut, Aiyana emerged cautiously. She had learned to be wary of unexpected visitors, as they usually brought trouble. But something about Tom's calm demeanor and the supplies in his wagon made her pause rather than retreat. "I brought some things," Tom said, climbing down from the wagon. "Thought you might be able to use them." He began unloading the metal tub, setting it down in the small clearing in front of their hut. Aiyana watched in bewilderment as he made several trips bringing soap, towels, and clean clothes. When he started hauling buckets of water from the nearby well, she finally found her voice. "Why?" she asked, the single word carrying the weight of months of isolation and rejection. Tom paused in his work, a bucket in each hand. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," he said simply. "And because I think you've forgotten what that feels like." For the first time in months, tears began to flow down Aiyana's dirt-stained cheeks. The kindness in this stranger's voice was almost too much to bear. She had grown so accustomed to disgust and rejection that simple human compassion felt overwhelming. We don't have money to pay you," she whispered. "I'm not asking for money," Tom replied, continuing to fill the tub with warm water he had heated over a fire. "I'm asking for the chance to help two people who deserve better than what they've been given." Itzel appeared in the doorway of the hut, drawn by the sound of voices. She hadn't spoken a word since their father's death, but her eyes tracked Tom's movements with growing interest. When she saw the steaming tub of water and the clean clothes laid out on a nearby rock, something flickered in her expression, a memory of what it felt like to be clean, to be cared for. Tom finished his preparations and stepped back respectfully. "I'll be over by my wagon," he said. "Take all the time you need. There's soap, clean clothes, and towels. When you're ready, I've got food cooking over the fire." As Tom busied himself with preparing a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, he could hear quiet splashing from behind the hut where the twins had moved the tub for privacy. The sounds were punctuated by what might have been quiet sobs, whether from relief, shame, or gratitude, he couldn't tell. Nearly 2 hours passed before Aiyana appeared around the corner of the hut. Tom almost didn't recognize her. Clean and dressed in one of the simple cotton dresses he had brought, her long black hair washed and braided, she looked like an entirely different person. Her natural beauty, hidden for so long beneath layers of grime and despair, was striking. But more than that, she carried herself with a dignity that had been buried but not destroyed. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I had forgotten." "Forgotten what?" Tom asked gently. "Forgotten that I was human," she replied, the honesty of the statement hitting Tom like a physical blow. Itzel emerged a few minutes later, equally transformed. Though she still didn't speak, she looked directly at Tom for the first time, and he saw intelligence and gratitude in her dark eyes. The twins sat by the fire as Tom served them the first hot meal they had eaten in weeks. As they ate, Aiyana began to talk. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, she told Tom about their father's death, about how grief had consumed them so completely that they had lost themselves. She spoke of the shame they felt, the way their own people had turned away, and how they had eventually stopped trying to maintain any connection to the world. "We became what they said we were," Aiyana said, staring into the fire. "Dirty, worthless, forgotten. You were never worthless," Tom said firmly. "You were hurting. There's a difference." As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Tom made another decision that would change all their lives. "I want you to come stay at my cabin," he said, "just until you get back on your feet. I've got room, and you shouldn't have to live like this anymore." Aiyana looked at her sister, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Why would you do this for us?" Aiyana asked. "You don't even know us." Tom was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames dance in the gathering darkness. "My mother went through something similar after my father died," he said finally. "I was too young to help her then. Maybe this is my chance to do what I couldn't do for her." The move to Tom's cabin marked the beginning of a transformation that went far deeper than clean clothes and regular meals. Tom's small but well-built home sat in a valley surrounded by cottonwood trees, with a clear stream running nearby and a view of the distant mountains that seemed to stretch into eternity. For the first few days, the twins were like wild animals, learning to trust. They would startle at sudden movements, eat quickly, as if the food might be taken away, and sleep fitfully on the bedrolls Tom had laid out for them in the cabin's main room. But gradually, the consistent kindness and respect Tom showed them began to work its quiet magic. Tom established a routine that gave structure to their days. Mornings began with coffee and breakfast, followed by small tasks around the cabin and property. He taught Aiyana how to tend his vegetable garden, showing her which plants needed water and which were ready for harvest. Itzel, still silent but increasingly engaged, proved to have a natural talent for working with the horses Tom kept in his small corral. "She has a gift," Tom told Aiyana one evening as they watched Itzel gently brush his mare Sage. The horses trust her immediately. "That's rare," Aiyana smiled, the first genuine smile Tom had seen from her. "Our father always said Itzel could speak to animals without words. I think she understands them better than she understands people." As the weeks passed, both sisters began to bloom like desert flowers after rain. Aiyana's natural intelligence emerged as she helped Tom with reading and writing tasks, revealing an education their father had provided that few people knew about. She began to share stories of Apache traditions, teaching Tom about her people's connection to the land and their complex spiritual beliefs. Itzel, while still choosing silence, communicated through actions and expressions that spoke volumes. She would leave small gifts for Tom: a perfectly shaped stone, a feather from a red-tailed hawk, wildflowers arranged in a tin cup. Her way of saying thank you for giving her back her humanity. The transformation wasn't just physical, though that was remarkable enough. Both sisters had regained healthy weight. Their skin glowed with cleanliness and good nutrition, and their hair shone like polished obsidian. But the real change was in their spirits. They laughed again, found joy in simple pleasures, and began to believe they had value as human beings. Tom found himself changing too. The quiet loneliness that had been his constant companion for years was replaced by the warmth of shared meals, gentle conversation, and the satisfaction of watching two broken souls heal. He began to realize that what had started as an act of compassion was becoming something much deeper. He was falling in love, not with one sister, but with both of them, in different ways. Aiyana's quick wit and fierce loyalty drew him like a moth to flame, while Itzel's gentle spirit and intuitive understanding touched something deep in his soul. The realization troubled him at first. How could he love two women? How could he choose between them without destroying the fragile happiness they had all found? The answer came to him gradually, through observation of Apache customs that Aiyana shared with him. In her people's tradition, it was not uncommon for a man to take sisters as wives, especially twins, who were considered to share a special spiritual bond. The practice ensured that sisters would never be separated and could support each other through the challenges of life. One evening in late November, as the three of them sat by the fire after dinner, Tom found the courage to speak what was in his heart. "I need to tell you both something," he said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Not just because I was able to help you, but because of who you are. Both of you." Aiyana looked up from the moccasins she was beading, while Itzel paused in her work of braiding leather strips into a rope. Both sisters seemed to sense the importance of what Tom was about to say. "I've come to love you both," Tom continued, the words coming easier now that he had started. "I know that might sound strange to some people, but I've learned about your customs, Aiyana. I know that among your people it's not unusual for sisters to share a husband, especially twins." The silence that followed was so complete that Tom could hear his own heartbeat. Then Aiyana set down her beadwork and looked directly at him. "Are you asking us to be your wives?" she said quietly. "I'm asking if you would consider it," Tom replied. "I can't promise you riches or an easy life, but I can promise you respect, protection, and love for as long as I draw breath." Itzel stood up suddenly, and for a moment Tom feared he had offended her. But instead of leaving, she walked over to him and placed her hand gently on his cheek. When she spoke, her voice was soft and rusty from months of disuse, but clear. "Yes," she said simply. It was the first word she had spoken since their father's death. Aiyana's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her sister, then at Tom. "We were dead," she said. "You brought us back to life. How could we not love the man who gave us back our souls?" The wedding took place on a crisp December morning, with the Apache elder Joseph Crow Feather officiating according to traditional customs that Tom had asked to learn and honor. The ceremony was small but meaningful. attended by a handful of people who had come to respect Tom's character and the sisters' transformation. Father Miguel, who had initially been skeptical of the arrangement, had come to see the genuine love and respect between the three of them. "God works in mysterious ways," he told Tom before the ceremony. "Who am I to question a love that has brought such healing?" Even some of the townspeople who had once crossed the street to avoid the twins now spoke of them with admiration. The transformation was so complete, so obviously genuine, that it challenged their preconceptions about human nature and the power of compassion. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Tom wore his best suit, while Aiyana and Itzel wore traditional Apache wedding dresses that they had sewn themselves, decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of their journey from despair to hope. As they exchanged vows, promising to honor and support each other through all of life's challenges, there wasn't a dry eye among the witnesses. In our tradition, Aiyana said during the ceremony, "Twins are believed to share one soul divided between two bodies. Today, we join that soul with yours, Tom McKenzie, making us complete." The years that followed were filled with the kind of happiness that comes from overcoming great adversity together. Tom expanded his small ranch with the help of his wives, who proved to be invaluable partners in every aspect of the business. Aiyana's intelligence and education made her an excellent bookkeeper and negotiator, while Itzel's gift with animals helped them build one of the most successful horse-breeding operations in the territory. The sisters never lost their close bond, supporting each other through the challenges of frontier life and celebrating each other's successes. When Aiyana gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Hope, Itzel was there as midwife and second mother. 2 years later, when Itzel bore twin sons, Aiyana returned the favor, and the children grew up knowing they had two mothers who loved them equally. The family became a symbol of something powerful in Canyon Ridge. Proof that love could triumph over prejudice, that dignity could be restored, and that sometimes the most unlikely unions could create the strongest foundations. Tom's simple act of compassion had rippled outward, changing not just the lives of two broken women, but the entire community's understanding of what it meant to see the humanity in others. As Tom grew older, he would often sit on his porch in the evening, watching his children play while his wives worked side by side in their garden. He would think about that October morning, when he had first decided to help two outcasts who smelled so bad that no one would go near them. He had thought he was saving them, but in truth, they had saved him too, from a life of loneliness, from the regret of not being able to help his mother, and from the narrow thinking that limited so many people's capacity for love. The Apache twins, who had once been the town's outcasts, became its most respected family, proving that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the simplest recognition of another person's worth. Their love story became legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that dignity, once lost, can always be reclaimed, and that true love sees beauty where others see only brokenness. In the end, Tom McKenzie didn't just clean up two women and make them his wives. He restored their humanity, honored their culture, and created a family built on the unshakable foundation of mutual respect and unconditional love. And in doing so, he discovered that the greatest gift you can give another person is the chance to remember who they really are, beneath whatever circumstances have temporarily defined them. This story reminds us that every person we encounter is fighting battles we know nothing about, carrying burdens that may have temporarily obscured their true worth. Tom McKenzie's simple act of seeing beyond appearances and offering dignity to those who had lost it changed not just 3 lives, but an entire community's understanding of compassion. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places, and sometimes The people society has written off are exactly the ones who have the most to teach us about resilience, gratitude, and the power of second chances. If this story touched your heart and made you think differently about the power of compassion, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that everyone deserves dignity and love. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that matter, stories that challenge us to be better human beings. Until next time, remember, the greatest adventures aren't always about conquering new territories. Sometimes they're about conquering our own prejudices and discovering the extraordinary in the ordinary.